In a New Orleans hospital room, an elderly woman lies in a vulnerable state as Hurricane Katrina rages outside. A younger woman rushes to her side, desperate to offer comfort. The elderly woman is prepared for what seems like her imminent passing. Amidst the uncertainty, a fleeting memory surfaces in her consciousness. This memory takes her back to a familiar tale from the past. In the heart of New Orleans, there lived a visually impaired watchmaker. His life was intertwined with the fate of his son, a soldier deployed to the battlefield. As his son departed, the watchmaker poured all his energy into crafting the town's most renowned timepiece. After merely 4 short months, a letter arrived bearing the devastating news of their son's demise in the war. The grief-stricken watchmaker decided to undertake an extraordinary endeavor. He resolved to engineer the town's beloved clock as a solemn tribute to all the lives lost in the war. His fervent wish was to turn back time, to bring their children back to life, and to reunite them with their sons. The entire town would forever remember this remarkable clock as the watchmaker's poignant farewell gift as he mysteriously vanished from their lives. In the present, the elderly woman, Daisy, turns to the younger woman, Caroline, with a request. She asks Caroline to retrieve a book from her suitcase and to open its pages. As Caroline complies, she discovers an array of mementos attached to the diary, each holding its own story. Caroline reads a last will and testament. The testament leaves no possessions of wealth, but revelations to Caroline as far as a man named Benjamin can remember. When the war was announced to have ended, the families of the dead soldiers mourned. But the war is a two-faced traitor being celebrated by the rest of the people in New Orleans. A man sprints nervously in the middle of the rejoicing crowd towards his house. He comes home to her dying wife after giving birth. The ill woman asks him to promise her to show love and affection to her child before she bids him farewell. Thomas steps towards the crib, leans over the crying little creature. Almost vomiting on sight, he jerkily carries him and runs the house outwards. He takes him to drown alive in the lake just a mile away from home, but a guard shouts over and runs after him. The guard loses sight of Thomas as he hides in a short alley. He inserts a piece of cloth into the child's swaddle and leaves him in the stairs of a well-lit house just behind the alley. A couple is sweetly talking outside the house, but an old lady interrupts their moment. The woman follows the old lady back inside the house, but the man drags her and mindlessly takes small steps down the stairs. The man could have crashed the tiny swaddled boy in the stairs if he has not immediately lifted his foot and skipped. The woman opens up the swaddle, revealing the oddest baby the two have ever seen. The couple gasps in horror and amusement. The man persuades her to leave the baby alone, but the woman picks him up and carries him inside the house. She keeps him in her drawers in her room and assists the aged people in the shelter. She comes in contact with the doctor, who she calls along to her room. The doctor diagnoses that the boy was blind from cataracts, deaf, has ossified hands and feet, and is also suffering from arthritis. The doctor declares that he was not a newborn, but an old man deteriorating to the grave. Queenie feels necessarily pitiful that she wants to keep him, but the doctor warns her that not everyone is meant to survive. Queenie carefully takes the baby to the shelter where the aged people gather and names the little boy Benjamin. Benjamin found a home under Queenie's care in the shelter, where he spent his early years thinking he was in the twilight of his life, much like the other shelter residents. Despite his age, he was the playful old man who relied on a wheelchair to move about. Queenie remained a constant presence as he aged into his youthfulness. One fateful night, Queenie took Benjamin to see a faith healer. She sought blessings to conceive a child and to rid Benjamin of what she referred to as the devil's curse. The healer asked Benjamin to rise from his wheelchair, but he stumbled and fell. With determination, he managed to stand and took tentative steps. In a moment of jubilation, the healer collapsed and passed away, celebrating Benjamin's triumph. Life in the shelter followed a rhythm of birthdays and farewells, leaving Benjamin questioning why death hadn't claimed him. He struck up an unlikely friendship with a pygmy man who introduced him to train rides and parks. The pygmy man eventually left Benjamin alone with crutches, and that night Benjamin spent walking himself home became one of his fondest memories. Sundays brought visits from the families of the shelter's elderly residents for Thanksgiving. During one such occasion, an elderly woman introduced Benjamin to her granddaughter, Daisy. She was a charming auburn-haired girl with captivating blue eyes, and Benjamin fell in love with her at first sight. Amidst the joy of serving the Thanksgiving lunch, Queenie announced her pregnancy. While Benjamin grappled with this news, Daisy began to open up and play with him. One night, beneath a bed in the basement, Benjamin and Daisy lit a candle and shared their secrets. Benjamin confessed that he wasn't as old as he appeared, and Daisy saw him as different from the others. Their misbehavior caught the attention of Daisy's grandmother, who scolded them. After Daisy left, Benjamin resumed getting to know the older residents. He even learned to play the piano from one of the ladies. As time passed, Benjamin noticed more changes occurring in his body. One day, he visited a port with another elderly man and was hired to work on a boat. The work in the sea excites the odd Benjamin. He grows close to Captain Mike, who eventually discovers that he was still a virgin. Captain Mike takes Benjamin to a brothel where they have a dose of liquors, sentiments, and women. Despite Benjamin's odd and peculiar appearance, a prostitute eagerly takes him but becomes flabbergasted when Benjamin does not run out of sexual vigor. He became her sole guest. While going home from the brothel, a car stops by Benjamin on the sidewalk. He invites Benjamin to the car and introduces himself as Thomas Button. The two heads to a luxurious bar and talks about Benjamin's disease. Later that night, Thomas takes him home and asks him if he could pay a visit time after time. Daisy comes by another Thanksgiving Day and spends the day with Daisy in the tugboat. Captain Mike revs the boat to life as Benjamin wishes. Benjamin's old lady friend dies one day. There, he comes to an epiphany that his life passes by differently than anyone else in the shelter. He lovingly bids farewell to her parents and the shelter, who wish him safety and happiness in turn. Benjamin promises to write Daisy a postcard from wherever he lands. His life in the sea was long and agonizing, but Daisy makes sure to send a letter back after every postcard. Meanwhile, Daisy advances to be a professional ballet dancer. Benjamin and his crew stop by brothels and bars whenever they dock on land. On one trip, Benjamin pays for a hotel room where he meets Elizabeth and her husband, Walter, who happens to be a spy. One night, when he had trouble dozing off, he gets acquainted with Elizabeth. They find solace with each other countless nights, meeting at the hotel lobby every night when he couldn't sleep, and when she doesn't have her husband around her, Benjamin falls in love with the married Elizabeth. Benjamin admits the unfortunate news to Daisy. Even though Daisy is making significant progress with her career, the news broke her heart. Benjamin spends many nights with Elizabeth where he conscientiously ends up making love to her. Their affair is too good to be true until one night Elizabeth no longer meets him in the lobby of their own little world. Benjamin learns to deal with losing Elizabeth when the war starts to break out back in the sea. The crew is preparing for salvage, but their tugboat has been caught in between the military distress. The opponents kill their captain and some of the crew, and the tugboat crashes in despair. Benjamin is fortunately alive and bids goodbye to the friendships who died along with the tugboat. Benjamin comes back home to the shelter where he sees the happy old Queenie. Despite the sorrow on the sea and the death in the shelter, both of them are immensely grateful and apologetic at the same time. One lonely morning, Daisy visits the shelter. Daisy hugs Benjamin, but Benjamin dwells that Daisy was just a girl when he left, but a beautiful woman had taken her place when he came back. Daisy and Benjamin head out for a night to reconnect, and Benjamin finds himself falling in love with a gracefully dancing Daisy, who kisses and seduces him before the night ends. She goes home disappointed as Benjamin adamantly rejects her. The following night, an old friend Thomas passes by the shelter and takes Benjamin for a dinner, where he admits his affection for Benjamin as a company. He takes Benjamin to the button factory, where he reveals that Benjamin is his son. He tours her around his house and introduces an old picture of Benjamin's mother, Caroline. Benjamin leaves Thomas's house confused and pained. Later, he comes back to the Buttons' mansion and picks him up for an early trip to the lake, where Thomas lets go of his life. Benjamin heads to New York for Daisy's show. He once again falls in love with the graceful Daisy on stage. After the show, he pays her a backstage visit. Benjamin becomes jealous and leaves the after-party when a friend kisses Daisy squarely on the lips. She chases after her but ends up leaving too after hearing that Benjamin felt happy for her boyfriend. Benjamin spends his days touring with his motorcycle and repairing things in the shelter. One day, he receives a sad letter and heads to a hospital in Paris. Daisy is suffering from multiple injuries after being hit by a taxi days ago. Benjamin wants to take her home, but Daisy asks him to stay out of her life. The broken Benjamin dealt with the agony through countless nightstands. Daisy reconnects with Benjamin one day where they end up making love that night. The two spend their years passionately making love at different places in different weather. Eventually, Benjamin's disease starts complicating their relationships. Daisy worries that Benjamin will wake up to an old lady one day, but she shrugs it off, knowing he loved him enough. The news of Queenie's death breaks Benjamin and Daisy, but moves on after time. Benjamin sells his father's mansion to live his years with Daisy in their own duplex. The loss of youth caused Daisy great pain, but she promises Benjamin to accept aging as it is. Daisy opens up her own ballet class and reveals that she is carrying Benjamin's child. Benjamin grows excessively worried that the baby might end up like him, or he might not be able to father the baby at all. Daisy eases him off by promising that she will make things work for their family. 9 months later, Daisy triumphantly gives birth to their first child and names the child after his mother, Caroline. Caroline becomes angry after the diary's revelation, but continued reading through the pages. The severity of Benjamin's condition became apparent when he realized that his child needed a father figure, not just a playmate. Despite his love for his wife and daughter, he made the difficult decision to leave them, along with all his possessions, to follow the path his illness was leading him on. Throughout his life, Benjamin had sent postcards filled with regret, and Caroline read every one of them. Benjamin spent the remainder of his life wandering from place to place, his existence feeling empty. One day, as a man who still looked like a teenager, Benjamin decided to visit Caroline and Daisy. To his surprise, he discovered that Daisy had remarried the man who was Caroline's father. Daisy and Benjamin shared one last passionate night together at a hotel before the years passed without them seeing each other again. Eventually, a man reached out to Daisy, delivering Benjamin's diary. In his early years, Benjamin had played a familiar tune on the piano, struggling with dementia. The elderly Daisy cared for the young Benjamin as he battled the effects of his illness, right up until the government of Louisiana replaced the town's cherished water. Strangely enough, his forgetful and painful years came to an end. As the hurricane engulfed New Orleans, Caroline finished reading the diary, bringing Benjamin's story and the tale of the reverse, engineered watch to a close. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and click the bell icon to receive notifications for new movie recaps.